Good afternoon and welcome to our panel discussion this afternoon, live from the School and Nursery Show here in Dubai. My name is Fiona Cottam and I'm the principal at Heartland International School, and I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by three illustrious guests from a range of schools across the city who are joining us to talk through one of the key questions that you as parents have posed to us as part of the show this weekend. So I'm delighted to be joined by Anup Mamonga, who is the academic principal at Global Indian International School, by Stephen Quinn, who is the Vice Principal of Horizon International School, and Alison Lamb, who is the Principal at, and I'm looking it up, Alison, you'll have to forgive me, it's Dubai Heights Academy. I was about to say the wrong name, so I'm so glad I got it right. Alison Lamb, Dubai Heights Academy. Look, thank you all three of you so much for joining us this afternoon. The question that's been posed to you is one of those huge questions. There are so many different answers, personalised approaches, no necessarily right or wrongs, but very different ways of approaching this. So the question that our audience have posed to you is parent partnerships. How important is the support and the role of parents in the school community? Now, I guess when we ponder that question, in the pre-COVID time, it's very different to pondering that question in the current times that we're in. Alison, I'm going to start with you, as the principal of a school. How important are those parent partnerships? And indeed, how have you been managing over the last 14 months in this new world that we're in terms of maintaining those parent partnerships?
Well, research says that parent partnerships benefit students greatly, academically, social and emotionally, in those competencies. So it's important that we do foster those parent partnerships, and we do it during these current times from the start. I think any school makes that impression from the moment a parent walks through the door the first time, and they will gauge an indication of whether that school, the feel of that school, is the right school for their children. Almost straight away, that's the first indication. It's really important that schools foster that, and therefore first impressions. We, as a school during COVID, are very active in meeting and greeting children and parents right at the start of the day and at the end of the day. So any member of staff that isn't required within the classroom as children are entering the classrooms in the morning, for example, all of us, the SLT team, security, support staff that aren't required in the classroom are outside, and that engages parents on a daily basis, face to face. So whereas initially, before COVID, our parents were coming into the school, and that's not been happening, obviously, due to the protocols that we're following. So that initial meet greet can actually create very positive starts to school days, and it can also nip any little niggles that parents might have, or someone's been sick. We facilitate those messages going back into school to teachers and so on. So, that's how we kind of start and end our day. As a school, we're always there. We communicate through our Seesaw platforms, Zooms. Any critical meetings are done in school, after school. Parent partnerships are, we've done anything from virtual events. We ensure that our parents know what's happening in school through sharing the curriculum that they're learning that children are doing on a weekly basis.
I think we've found ways, haven't we? We've had to find ways because we know how important it is. Stephen, from your perspective at Horizon, any other ways? The start and end of the day, you're absolutely right, Alison. You get those bits right, the things that happen in between find their way. But anything in particular at Horizon, Stephen?
It's funny how you started that question. If you'd asked this 14 months ago, I think all our answers would have been very, very different to the ones we are able to give now. I think we came at it from a point of view of listen, everybody, this is new for. There isn't a person here who's been through a pandemic or tried to open a school during a pandemic. And we coined a phrase in our school that we're building the plane as we fly it. And that includes the parents as well. The parents did not know what school would look like opening during the pandemic. So we have almost over communicated with parents this year. We were always a school that was very good at communicating, but every little thing we've tried to find a way to communicate through to them. And what we tried to make sure is we didn't lose what makes a school, and that is the learning, the teaching, and the enjoyment of the children. And we've tried to keep those dialogues going as much as we can. We've introduced extra parent-teacher consultations. Interestingly, I don't think parent-teacher consultations will ever be the same again now, actually. I think that's been one of the positives of the pandemic, that actually anytime, anywhere can now be a reality for us. But I think those key points, the morning, the afternoon, but those key points, those newsletters, those communications from principals and vice principals, if they're timely, if they're purposeful, they build that reassurance for parents to know that their children are at that, a safe environment, but also environment that still has a focus on teaching and learning.
Yeah. And it's always hard when you're the last person in that room to come to that question. But any further thoughts on what you're doing at Global Indian?
Yes, definitely. There are two parts to this. First is how a day goes. So normally most days would start with a beginning, middle, and an end where the parents are communicating and talking to us and sending information. And the other is how they are partnering with the school to help us improve. So we get a lot of that and saying, could you alter that? Could you improve on this? We do not understand the Arabic. So we have found out that there are no walls anymore. There are no classrooms. All the walls have fallen. So when we are teaching and the parents are listening and learning as well, they are finding ways to alter the education process. So they are really in partnership now, more so than they were before. They're helping us with the curriculum development. They're helping us with our teaching practices, the learning practices, saying my child learns better in the way you taught yesterday than the child learns today. So as the first teachers of their students, of the children, they're actually helping us to alter our practices. And that has been a huge change, a huge shift than what was happening before. Apart from what they said, the parental meetings are easier, talking, communication, that's one part of partnership. But the other is that they are helping us in and helping us to inform our practices and helping us to change, because as he said, this is a pandemic for the first time for all our lives. Like we've never had a pandemic in our lives before. So we are actually looking at changing and evolving to suit the needs of the parents. And while they are actually also evolving to see that this is a new learning style, this is a new learning system. So we're finding a middle path, and that's been a wonderful journey.
Let's stay on that theme, Alison, if we can do, because what was very, very different for all of us from last March through into the summer certainly was that parents had windows into our classrooms for the first time in a way that they never did before. So parents working with us, as you said, Anupa, on sort of school improvement strategies. Dubai Heights, anything in particular that you've done or that you're doing or indeed that you're planning to do in terms of how parents' role in the school has changed, either through the pandemic or indeed might change in the future in terms of those partnerships? Is there anything that's quite unique to what you do and how you engage with parents on those types of levels?
There's things that we feel that have worked better in terms of our operations and for students' benefit is actually how independent students have been even from the age of 3 entering school, and then how that has facilitated a quicker start and a more settled start to learning, which I'm sort of very mindful that maybe we consider similar practices going forward even after the pandemic, because children are much quicker into getting into their learning in the mornings now by sort of creating that departure from the doors, and they go in and they're all independent. They put their own bags and they get their own equipment, rather than previously we had parents facilitating a lot of that, and it really kind of was a disadvantage, an unsettling start to each day, and that was almost like a distraction. So I think going forward, yes, I think we might think of doing things differently. When we've mentioned here about we've almost opened up more communications now, because it's so easy to access a face-to-face meeting through a Zoom or a Teams chat, face-to-face in that respect. And there may be more of that in the future. I think we may facilitate more communication like that than either through an email or a telephone call, because that face-to-face instant makes a big difference. If a parent, in terms of organisation, they're at work, it's easy for them in a lunch hour to have a quick chat with you and do it that way. So we may kind of consider different ways of communicating, well, not different, but similar ways of communicating now after the pandemic. I think we've reflected. I think we have to consider, in terms of our operations now, I don't know whether we will be operating regularly or normally in September, or we've got what we're doing now, or a kind of a bespoke what we're doing now. We really don't know. So we're just having to be open-minded, flexible and forward-thinking about how we're going to operate in September, August, September start.
No, I totally agree, and it is still the unknown, isn't it, in many respects. And I think that the Majlis meeting that we had with Dr. Abdullah was positive in terms of what they hope that, things will be improved and changed for September, but we can't guarantee that. The world is certainly on a tailspin in terms of how it's operating at the moment. Stephen, do you think parents have maybe, in terms of their understanding of the curriculum and their engagement with the curriculum, however, even though you talked beautifully about the walls being taken out of the school and parents having that full access. Do you think there's a disconnect? Do you think that parents maybe don't feel as involved as they had been before, not being able to come in and have coffee and sit in the cup, those types of things? How do we compensate for that in terms of our partnerships?
I think naturally that there is a worry that parents feel at arm's length because of the protocols that are in place. Naturally, that does create barriers. I agree. It's about knocking those down. I think what was really interesting, I know a lot of schools are different in Dubai in terms of how much face-to-face teaching is going on. I'm in a school where face-to-face teaching started predominantly for most children back in September. And the one thing we hadn't actually considered was that in the preceding term, like you said, the parents had a really unique window into what we did on a daily basis as practitioners. And what we hadn't quite reflected upon was when we go back to face-to-face, they lose that. And we had parents commenting, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what the children are learning. And it was very odd because they would never have questioned that before the pandemic started. But that unique window, I think, did give them a greater appreciation of the learning process and the curriculum. And they felt actually they could contribute more than they ever have to that. So one of the things we needed to reflect on is, well, how do we keep that window they were given before the summer holiday in a meaningful way? And that's where technology has really come in. We set up Zooms for showcase mornings and allow parents to see that. The seesaw is never ending in terms of updates. And like I said, we've introduced extra parent-teacher consultations, but that's something that we're still reflecting on in terms of taking parents through that journey now that they have a much clearer understanding of the journey we're on.
And Nukma, how do we harness that energy? Because there is a danger that we will lose that. We have had parents in our classrooms and they have been very much part of the learning in a way they never have been before. How do schools make sure that they balance that right in the future? They harness the energy, but at the same time, not push parents back, but say, this is our school community, this is how we're operating, you're welcome to have a window onto that. But yet they brought huge skill and expertise to the table and helped us on our journey, didn't they? How do we bottle that up?
The advantage of this has been that previously we would have one teacher vis-a-vis 25 children. And now when the children were studying at home, we had one teacher, we had one child, and we had a parent. And the children have kind of benefited. Their reading, their understanding of the concept went up because the parent was also explaining along with the teacher. The downslide has been, of course, there always is, that the children became dependent on one person. So now we're telling the parents to let the child be an independent learner rather than hand-holding too much. If they don't understand, of course, we need to step in and we need to help those children. But if there's too much hand-holding, they'll never be independent in their learning. And that's how we have, what we have started in our school is we've started a PSG group, the parent support group. So from each grade, we have asked for volunteers and that volunteer would take care of that little grade. And if there are any concerns or any issues, they're brought to us and we handle them. So we're not dealing with 600 odd parents. We are dealing with maybe 16 parents who then share their ideas, and there could be an issue with some learning in some subject, some idea where the child could not understand. There's still specific ideas, but at least they come to us from one person and we learn to handle them. So that's really working well in our schools right now, and the parents are very happy that they have a platform, they have a voice, and they can exert it and use it. So that's really helped us. So that's how we're using it.
I don't know if either of you found it, Alison, particularly, as the principal of a school. I certainly do think that during the pandemic, school principals didn't just become the principals of their staff and their students, but actually of the parents as well. Our communications and how we sort of took care of them actually became a lifeline for so many of them. Question that's come into us on the WhatsApp group sort of turns that on its head slightly and says, what's the school expectation of parents now in terms of what we expect from them, particularly with the uncertainty of the COVID pandemic still ongoing? We understand what their expectation is of us, I think, 5-star quality or 7-star quality, we understand that. What's our expectation of parents at the moment? And that's a challenging question, actually. I'm glad I'm asking you that, and I'm not sitting in your seat.
I don't think the expectation really has changed. We want parents to be involved in the children's school experiences and support with the learning in a home environment and take that further. So I actually don't feel that I expect anything different. I feel that to keep going, we need to keep them involved, and however that looks, whether it's in school or virtually, keep communications going so that they can do everything they can to support their child in progress, I think, in their progress at school. And this time has questioned whether there are now gaps in learning for students through those who have done distance learning and those who feel that the classroom experiences have been different than previously. And it's going to be very interesting with our end of school year data this year, because we may have expectations of parents to help with more home learning to try to bridge gaps for students. That might be something that we have to look at going forward. And so therefore our data analysis is really going to be important at this time. I feel that just parents, it's just so important that parents are constantly involved in school life. I don't think it's it would be any different.
I don't either, but I wonder, and I'll just pose this, and it's purely a personal thought, Stephen, I'll just throw it at you. I think the level of trust, however, has increased, and I think the level of trust has had to increase. Parents have always handed their children over to us to be safe, but now they're handing their children over to us in a very unknown environment, which is very unknown and does cause great anxiety, particularly for those who've chosen to send their children into school. Our expectations of parents really is to trust us, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to follow on from Alison, to say that really it's almost saying to the communities, whichever school we're at, to continue with that trust and confidence and build it. I come back to the phrase I mentioned before about building the plane as we fly it. We as educators have to hold our hands up and say we are going to make mistakes along the way. We are going to get certain things wrong, whether it's to do with teaching and learning or the protocols. But it's the parental community being understanding that when those mistakes are made, they are communicated, but communicated in a way that's constructive. And your point about having those key links in the parental community, I think, is more important than ever, because we see one side of a child, parents see completely the other side of a child, and it's important that what we're doing is having that impact with a child, both emotionally, socially, and academically. And if it's not, we need that to be fed back to us so that trust and confidence continues to be built on. But I don't think any of the communities that we work at would be successful if parents lost that trust and confidence. And even if if the ball gets dropped once, it's, you know, we're not tarnished with, oh, well, you know, they don't know what they're doing. It's right, okay, we move on and make adaptations.
And I think it's fair to say, isn't it, you know, because of where we live and because of how we operate, they were brave decisions on the part of KHDA and the authorities to say schools will reopen in September. It was the bravest thing they did. It was also the best thing that they did, because it's helped us to thrive, and it's helped our young people to get back to a sense of normality, hasn't it? But this may continue for some time. You know, any words of wisdom, Anupa, that you might give to parents as this pandemic continues and life as we know it continues to change?
Right. I think, like you said before, parents need to trust us, and we need to empower our parents and believe in them. And that's what makes a difference. We are there for the children, whether it's them or us. So this partnership only works if we are in it together. It won't happen if we have expectations of them and they don't have expectations of us, but they also have expectations of us, and we need to find a middle ground so that we all are on the same level and we work for the betterment of the students. As long as students are safe, they're happy, they're learning, they're engaged, I think both educators and parents are happy. We're a happy lot. If our children are happy, we're a happy lot. If they're safe, we're a happy lot. And together we have to work towards that.
One of, you know, some of the greatest research that's come out always says that a parent being involved in the child's learning is so crucial to the child's development, whether that's just, you know, reading or reinforcement of what's been done in school. Do you think, Alison, that parental partnership and that sense of parental engagement and learning has actually improved as a result of what we've been through as a world?
Yes. I think that we now have much more respect from I think the word respect is extremely important right now, because the parents have seen what we've done as schools to adapt and support the children in a safe and secure way. And I personally feel that parents know more about our schools now because of the open classrooms, through the live lessons that they've observed, how much we in terms of communication, how much we've had to show what our schools are like inside through videoing in our newsletters and our communications. And I think parents truly respect what we've done to ensure that teaching and learning can continue in a safe way during this pandemic.
Yeah. Stephen, your thoughts on that same question, really?
Yeah, I agree. I think what was forced upon us last March, you know, was only going to make those links stronger, because, as you alluded to earlier on, Fiona, that it wasn't just the children that needed support, it was the parents that needed support. And when schools went above and beyond to provide that support, it can only strengthen those links. And I think, whereas maybe in the past the Dubai educational landscape seemed a ruthless money-grabbing place, I think it actually became what schools should be, and hearts and souls of communities, and it was the constant. It was the only constant that the children had, the parents had, and us as educators had. We were all in our isolated bubbles in our own houses, flats, and it was the only thing that brought us out of that, being together. And I think, yeah, I think there's a greater appreciation of what education is, and it's about engagement of learning. And I think some parents may have found that a bit tricky at home with their children, getting that engagement and excitement in education, and realizing that in front of 20, 30 children, it's quite a skill. And I think there is a greater appreciation, but also an appreciation from them on us as community schools.
Okay. You know, we've given great insight on that, and there's some profound words actually that we've sort of thrown around this afternoon as if they're easy words to use, but we've talked about trust, we've talked about respect, we've talked about breaking down walls, and most of all, we've talked about partnerships, haven't we? It isn't just about relationships. We've talked about creating solid partnerships with parents, and I think that schools in Dubai really need to be proud of that. I know that we've had great leadership in terms of the decision from the government and from KHDA, but as school leaders, it's taken a lot of courage, and my hat goes off to all of my colleagues across the city for how they've managed through these times. Your final thoughts, really, to leave our parents with, just those final snippets for the afternoon, and I'll start with you. What would you say to them in relation to parent partnerships and moving forward, both in these times and in the unforeseen times of the future? Your final thoughts?
I think we've had a journey together, the parents and us, and that is unbreakable. we've moved from the pandemic to hopefully moving to a non-pandemic time. It's been tumultuous. It has been a time when we've not understood what was happening, and the parents have supported us because they understood it was something new for us as well. We were not prepared, neither were they. But the most resilient were our students. So I think because they were resilient, the parents also gained confidence, and so did we quickly. Our teachers quickly, garnered their learning, and we moved forward. We taught our parents, we taught our students, and I think that that faith that they have in us has been amazing. I think what we have learned is we just held hands and we moved forward. And that's something which you cannot let go. Our parents are very appreciative, and so are we, that the support was mutual. It wasn't one-sided. So I think that with that thought, that's the biggest partnership that we could get.
Thank you, Anupma. Stephen, same final words of wisdom from you.
Oh, I wish I could. I think you alluded to it, Fiona. I think we're desperate to see that light at the end of the tunnel. We are. But I think parents need to be reassured that behind the scenes, amongst educators, amongst the KHDA, there is that discussion about pandemic fatigue. You know, we're very aware that could become the main issue moving forward with protests. But schools are working hard to find the next step, the next development in avoiding that fatigue. You know, our children are having to learn in a way that they never have done before, in a lot of ways very restrictive. And it's about being creative so that they don't feel as if they're missing out on certain elements of their social, emotional learning. So I think parents just need to be aware that we as schools, and I think the panel will agree that more than ever, schools are working in collaboration now, no matter who owns us or what. That's gone out the window now. The partnerships between schools are stronger than ever to share best practice, to move things forward so that pandemic fatigue doesn't become an issue, which it potentially can do, and parents should be reassured that those conversations are ongoing.
Thanks, Stephen. Alison, final words from you?
Well, going on from the word fatigue, I think the big push for us all now, which will involve parents, is well-being, because we've got to protect the well-being of our students, our staff, and our parents. And as Anu said, our parents have been amazing in supporting us, and parents' support of us actually has an impact on teacher morale. And if you've got high teacher morale and positive teachers because they're getting the support from the parents, it has a sort of a cyclical effect where that then impacts on how they're teaching and the benefit of the children. So if we're all in this together, if we support each other, then we'll go far and we'll not have this fatigue because we're not battling against negativity. We're just being proactive and positive, and we're reactive. If someone isn't happy or something isn't working well, I think we're more reactive than ever. We're literally at the end of a Zoom call, an email, a seesaw comment, any platforms that the schools have got, and we actually react almost immediately to ensure that everyone is happy, and we resolve matters, I think, much more quickly now. We've just been we've just been really smart with our communications now.
And on that note, actually, it's a great note to finish on. We're still looking forward. We're still planning. We're thinking of next steps. We're talking about well-being. We're making sure that our community is safe and well, which will indeed only strengthen those partnerships as we move forward. On behalf of the School and Nursery Show, a huge thanks to Anupma Monga, to Stephen Quinn from Horizon, and to Alison Lamb from Dubai Heights. It's been a real privilege and a pleasure to listen to your words of wisdom this afternoon. And I'm sure that our audience at home who are watching this either today or indeed in the weeks ahead will also take great comfort and great levels of support from the guidance that you've given as school leaders, and indeed that we commit to give as we move into the future. So on behalf of the School and Nursery Show, our thanks to you for joining us today. We look forward to our final session coming up later this afternoon.